Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Gut Brain Method Lecture. And I'm so excited as your host and registered dietitian, longevity, and nutrition specialist to introduce you Dr. Mahmoud A Ghannoum. He is one of the leading doctors and director of the Center for Medical Mycology at Case Western Reserve University and University Hospital Cleveland Medical Center and Integrated Microbiome Center. Dr. Mahmoud, the world's leading gut microbiome researcher, according to Washington Post, and today he's going to present an exciting lecture on the gut-brain axis, microbiome, and your health, and some of the practical solutions, treatments, and applications that we all should be learning and bringing attention to help our clients to heal our family and ourselves. Dr. Mahmoud, it is such an honor to have you here today. The stage is yours, and I cannot wait to learn from you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you. So, as you mentioned, I'm going to talk to you today about the microbiome, gut-brain axis, and our health.
Yes.
So, the learning objective, what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you how the gut-brain, they speak together or they communicate together, and how they are really related and can influence different conditions and diseases. And finally, I would like to talk, as you heard, about what sort of ways we can rebalance about the microbiome so that we are able to have better health and reduce all these complications, including autism, depression, and stress. So to start with, the gut-brain axis, the first time people started to realize that there is a relationship between the gut and the brain was by an army surgeon who was really examining gastric juices secreted by people who had intragastric fistula. And what he found that there was intestinal function is related to the mood. And more recent studies start to tell us that the brain and the gut, they talk together. Before, we used to think it's really top down, which means our brain talking to our gut, but now we are seeing it's two-way system. It's bidirectional. The brain talks to the gut and vice versa. In this way, the two opposing directions of communication really are dependent on each other, and they help each other, okay? And what is the main purpose of this communication is to try and have homeostasis, which means balance, to balance our gut and to protect our body against detrimental factors. So this communication between the gut and the brain is really important because it could affect different functions in both our brain and the gut, the neural, the inflammatory, as well as hormonal signaling pathway. And the gut microbiome, those organisms that live in our gut, are actively involved in this process because they can affect brain development, physiology, psychology, as well as behavior, believe it or not. And in particular, the microbiome plays an important role with controlling and managing our mood, anxiety, and pain, okay? And that's why it's really very important to understand this process. In this figure, I can show you there's two-way communication. You can see one arrow going up to the brain and one coming from our brain to the gut. In other words, when we have imbalance in our gut, the first thing, if you look on the right-hand side, we have what we call dysbiosis, which means imbalance, imbalance in the microbiome. When this happens, guess what? We can affect the brain. We can affect our mood, as we mentioned, our anxiety, our stress. But at the same time, if we have issues with our brain, we are stressed, and guess what? We'll start feeling things happening in our gut, and that's where the two-way communication takes place, okay? And I like this figure because it shows you how they are all interrelated. Not only the gut and the brain, but also our skin. Believe it or not, when you have imbalance in the microbiome in our gut, we start to see changes in the microbiome in the skin, which really can, for in certain cases, increase acne, for example.
Yep.
Okay? Now, how do they talk together, the gut and the brain? And really, they use what we call the vagus nerve, okay? Which, as you know, is a cranial nerve connecting the brain to the visceral organs, different organs in our body. And this vagus nerve, you can really mediate the effects on our central nervous system. And in fact, there are studies to show that it could affect our fat storage, GI barrier function, like leaky gut, for example, inflammation, as well as increasing, as I mentioned, stress and anxiety. Now, because of this, people are starting to think that, you know, it may be a good way if we can understand the vagus nerve very well. Guess what? We will be able to help our communication between the gut and brain and reduce all the side effects we see. Now, another function, everybody, when you listen, people talking about the microbiome, they only focus on bacteria. And guess what? Because I am the director of the Center for Medical Mycology, which is the study of fungi, I say, listen, I am a fungi, okay? And we need to think of fungus, because fungus also play an important role in all these activities. In fact, studies have been shown that, you know, especially in multiple sclerosis, which is, again, immune effect, can be affected because of the fungi, by the fungi itself. Because similar to what we see in IBD, irritable bowel syndrome, also happens in multiple sclerosis. And this is just a list in this slide of different diseases and conditions that could be affected by this gut-brain interaction. You can see Parkinson's, Alzheimer, autism. We have a lot of interest in autism, as well as we have other conditions, which is depression, anxiety, even aging play an important role in this communication between the gut and the brain. So I'm going to focus on the gut-brain axis and the microbiome, focusing in 3 different areas: stress, depression, and autism. But I'm going to go a little bit fast so that just to give you an overall view, not necessarily to go into great details. The first one, stress and the microbiome, how they are related. You know, if we look at stress, there are really different definitions of stress, but it is really the total response to environmental demands or pressure. We have different types of stress, acute to chronic. Sometimes it occurs only once, or sometimes it repeats itself or repetitive, and also can be we sometimes can predict that we are going to be stressed. Sometimes it is unpredictable. But really what's important, we get exposure to stressor have been shown a lot of the time to affect or increase our susceptibility to different GI issue, gastrointestinal issue, okay? So stress in general can contribute to many disabilities worldwide, and you know, we saw this a lot in the COVID situation, where we saw so many issues because of the stress of the COVID, you know. What about the relationship between the microbiome and stress? You know, people looked at stress many, many years ago. It's not something new. And they found that there is effect in environmental and dietary stress could also affect our gut microbiome. And this has been shown in studies in mice and favoring the establishment, or in other words, the increase in the level of the pathogens, bacterial pathogens and fungal pathogens. Also, social stress, a lot of the time, can increase the risk of inflammation. Related to this, we have pro-inflammatory cytokines increase, and that can increase a lot of inflammation, GI issues, and of course, you start to have different conditions affecting us, okay? Also, stressor affects the gut microbiome, especially by secreting, as I mentioned before, cytokines, like, for example, interleukin-6, which is a bad cytokine because it's pro-inflammatory. You can see it increased when we have stress. And also, we may have altered level of different markers. We don't have to go into them, but really by increasing these different stress markers, we have more imbalance or more dysbiosis, okay? Now, during stress, we can see that there are alterations at the level of central nervous system, which can affect our gut. As I showed you in that figure, where if we have changes in the brain, we can also influence the gut neuromotor and secretory function. We can affect the immunity and, of course, the microbiome composition. Again, when I say microbiome composition, we are increasing the bad guys and reducing the good guys. Now, in the case of dysbiosis, also this will lead, because you have a lot of the pathogens, our inflammatory system come to deal with it, so we have a lot of inflammation occurring, okay? And the sequence of events, as I mentioned, it could start from the brain down or from the gut up, okay? Now, here is what happens when we are healthy as far as stress is concerned. You can see when we are in well-being, our functional hyperaccess is really functioning very well, normal behavior, normal neuroception, but also we have balanced microbiome. So we're looking at the top and the bottom, normal GI function and immune, normal gut morphology. When we have stress, we have dysfunction in all these aspects. And you can see increased pain perception, altered behavior. We have dysbiosis, which again affects the neurotransmitters in our gut, which affects the brain, and lower grade or overt inflammation, as well as tissue damage, which is manifested by leaky gut. Now, depression and the microbiome. So we talked about stress. Now, similar sort of situation we see with microbiome and depression. And as I alluded to, this was very, very clear when we had COVID. When you look during COVID, we had an increase in the prescription for anti-anxiety medication. People started to have antidepressant also was increased. So we needed to reduce the anxiety, but also we need to help it up, okay? We also saw a lot of an increase in drugs for insomnia. People did not sleep very well, okay?
Yeah.
And when you look at, there are a number of surveys, I'm not gonna go over it because I'm sure people know that really COVID brought a lot of mental health, and also we had really an increase in stress to great extent, like nearly more than 300-fold increase in that, and more than nearly 900-fold increase compared to the call volume. So many people start calling their psychiatrist to try to get help with respect to the depression they have. Now, this microbiome and depression are related, as you can expect, which is related to the microbiome imbalance. And you found that 60% of patients with depression may have intestinal function disturbance, the IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, okay? Also depressed patients, they have the other way, microbiome abundance and diversity change. We have less diversity. The more diverse our microbes, the better. But with depression, it goes down, and we see that the level of good guys, such as bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, in the feces of patients become less and less, whereas the bad ones go up, okay? Now, this is the bidirectional. I already talked about it. I'm not going into detail because we already talked in that simple graph, which I showed at the beginning, how things are really affected. We have changes in the gut, could affect the brain, and you can see in this figure how arrows going up and down to demonstrate this activity. Okay, what about autism and the microbiome? So we talked about stress, depression, and now autism. I have a great interest in autism because I'm not going to go into great details here, but just to let you know, we conducted a clinical trial in autistic kids, and we compared them to their non-autistic siblings, okay? And this is the microbial profile of the autistic patients and their healthy individuals. You can see we looked at 81 subjects, mostly the male, very, very high in autistic kids compared to healthy people. We looked at the time. So these are the demographic which we have. We don't have to go over them, but we looked at different aspects. What sort of food they eat, what sort, were they breastfed or not. All this we captured. We also captured upper GI symptoms, okay? And you can see in the cases with autism, we had higher GI symptom, gastrointestinal symptom high in those cases compared to their control. Also, the GI comorbidities was higher, and also the use of PPI was increased in these patients, okay? Now, when you look at that, we looked at the diversity and how they separate. Let me see if this can work as a video. Oh, I think it will. Uh-oh. So you can see here what we did, we looked at the organisms and looked, does the autistic kids, they have microbes that separate from their healthy. And you can see two groups, red, which is the control, versus the blue, which is autism. Look how well separated they are. This is the bacteria. The same thing happened when we look at the fungi. Okay, let me see. Look at this. Again, we were able to show that the organisms are different between autistic versus non-autistic. Very, very nice. You can see separation. Okay. Now, with that, we then looked into more details about what sort of organisms are increased or decreased, or if they are unique to autistic kids. And you can see here, we always look at the microbiome, which is the bacteria, and the mycobiome, the fungi, and you can see how they really are different with autism versus the control, for example. Okay? And we were able to identify some of these organisms, and we found, like for example, it's like a sporon, which is produce a potent biosurfactant, prevents the adhesion of candida, which, as you know, candida is a bad bug, which really we wanted to be reduced. Okay? And the same, we found others which are higher, like Rhodomonas, for example, which is really known to cause disease and infection. Okay? When you look at cyanobacteria, look at this. Cyanobacteria is completely reduced in red. In autism is low, whereas the healthy were high. And this cyanobacteria is important because it can break down fiber. And these kids suffer a lot of the time with the way they eat. Okay? The same we saw with respect to protobacteria. It increased in red. You can see it's high versus the healthy, lower. And guess what? These are all statistically significant situation. You can see with the phylum, for example. Okay? So we are decreasing the good guys and increasing the bad guys. All right? The same with respect. More details. I'm not going to bother you with that, but just sufficient to say we really are able to see a decrease in the beneficial organism and an increase in the bad ones. We looked at the fungus, the same thing we saw here, where we saw an increase in Candida albicans, as well as which is a bad yeast when it is at high level. It's very important for me to explain. Having Candida, 50% of us have it, but as long as it is at low level, it's fine. When it causes issues, when it's overgrown. Okay? And the same, we saw that there is a decrease in Galactomyces geotracheum, which really is very good organism, went down because it can really ferment complex sugar. Now, when our conclusion, we found that we were able to identify bacteria and fungi that associate with the gut in imbalance. We found that some factors which are important, male gender to be higher with autism, low fish diet they had, seizure, and upper gastrointestinal issues. And really now what we wanted to do is, what can we do to identify a formulation to rebalance this microbiome? Now, this is what you wanted to know, is what can we do about this?
Yeah, the practical applications,
The practical, okay? And that's why I want to talk about diet, lifestyle, as well as nutritional
Dr.
supplement.
Mahmoud,
Okay?
before you switch into practical, I want to ask you a couple of more questions on the theory. So you touched on gut-skin axis and you mentioned acne. Do you have any scientific research or evidence showing a connection of something like bigger skin issues like eczema or psoriasis, like the scaly, itchy skin? Do you have any connection with that to microbiome and what's going on in the gut?
Yes. Yes, we published a study in atopic dermatitis, which is eczema, as we say.
Yes.
We looked at the skin of patients with atopic dermatitis, compared them to healthy areas, and what we found that there is an increase in Staphylococcus staph aureus, which is a bacteria which is pathogen, as you know, as well as Alternaria, which is a fungus. Alternaria was also increased in these patients. Another interesting study done in patients with acne, where they took the drug antibiotic minocycline. Antibiotic minocycline, when they take it orally, of course, what it does, it kills not only the infecting organism, but also kills the good guys. And then when they looked at their skin, not only the microbiome changed in the gut, but also in the skin of these acne patients.
Okay. Another question about, you mentioned the connection to depression. Do you have anything to say about anxiety? Because it's much more common and now it's become socially acceptable to have a high anxiety character. And then I also see in my practice very often that it's associated with gut microbiome. Could you please elaborate on this?
Sure. I mean, what we did actually a study, we published a paper with Biome using their biome effects of mycosa, and what we found that when people took the probiotic compared to the control, the placebo control, what we found that by improving the gut microbiome, their anxiety also improved. That was a tertiary endpoint. The primary endpoint, which is bloating, abdominal discomfort, as well as flatulence, were better. Secondary, as well, including the constipation and regularity improved, but also anxiety improved. So there is definitely a relationship between anxiety and the microbiome.
Got it. And then you also allocated quite a few slides to talk about stress, which I very much appreciate. And I think you're going to give us more practical solutions. But I wanted to see if you've done any studies or come across any studies that what kind of stress reduction techniques are the most potent and the most accessible to people to have on their hands to be able to create better gut brain connection.
Sure. I mean, one of the most important things, as we mentioned, as you said also yourself, there are so many people are stressed out and this sort of thing. So to me, we really need to have, number one, some meditation. We need to have yoga. Yoga is very important. You laugh at me. I'm Lebanese. I mean, if I tell my mother I do yoga, she'd say, "What's wrong with this kid?" But what's nice about it, you go to yoga, you spend 1.5 hours doing stretching, trying to really be able to do all these moves, and it takes you out and it relaxes you. So doing yoga is very, very critical. Another thing which is very important is exercise. You need to go and walk. Like, for example, after a long day here at work, guess what I do? I go home, I have a dog, his name is Prince. I take him for a walk. Oh my goodness, I tell you, I love that. But by the end of it, I feel great because, first of all, I have to keep him under the control. He's a funny dog. Whenever he sees a car, he goes in a whirlpool like this, and all the neighbors, they love him because he makes them laugh. But he relaxes me, especially in nature and this sort of thing. So all of these will help you, all these, practices. It's a holistic approach. That will really help you.
Thank you. Yes, that's all of the questions I had. Please continue.
Great. So now, with respect, 3 different things how we can help: diet, lifestyle, and nutritional supplements. The good news for the future, I would say, going forward, we are learning that dysbiosis is a microorganism that can affect our disease condition. So now what can we do about it? How can we bring it back and allow us to be in a good situation? The first thing is diet as a modifier of the microbiome. Okay, so first, to let you know, I wrote a book called Total Gut Balance. Total Gut Balance, which is really describes the microbiome science part, and then it goes into what type of food you need to eat and this sort of thing. Okay, and also it has recipes, so that will really be very helpful. So here, the effect of nutrients on the gut microbiome and amyloid formation. So you can see a lot of the time protective effect. We have different type of probiotic, plant food, for example, whole grain, fresh fruit, vegetables, fish. I love fish, salmon, and so you need to cut down meat, red meat in particular, because of the saturated fat. And also, studies have shown that it increases organisms that are pro-inflammatory. Vitamins, critical. Vitamins such as B12. And if you have issue with the fungus Candida, vitamin B, A, B, and C shows that it's really very important that you have these, because a really minimal amount of these vitamins can have effect on GI issues, on Candida.
What are the best sources? Vitamin B's, it's mostly from animal products, isn't it?
There are, but nowadays it may be from animal products, but you can also get available supplements, for example, not necessarily to eat the meat, and then you can see all of these. I love to have nuts, like for example, pistachio. Pistachio is fantastic, and you can see olive oil. Especially natural olive oil is very, very good. Lemon, for example. All of these, like it is a Mediterranean diet, but a little bit less carb and less alcohol will be very, very helpful. Okay?
So,
now, and also there are a large number of studies that show that the relationship between depression and diet. Okay? When they look a number of studies, which you can see in this slide, examined 16 eligible randomized clinical trials, and they found that there is really dietary intervention significantly reduce depression. It's very, very important from that point of view. Okay. Also, pro-inflammatory dietary patterns have been specifically linked to less depression as well. Okay. This is, as you can see, we have a lot of data. If people are interested, they need to start going and getting food that will reduce depression, and also eating healthy food is going to definitely help you in that. And as I mentioned, the Mediterranean diet, also Total Gut Balance diet, which I have because it's modifications from the Mediterranean diet, will really a good guide if they like to have. Okay. Diet and depression, there are different ways that they can help each other. In particular, they can help with different anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and prebiotic properties. The fiber, very, very important. Okay, and processed food, you need to avoid processed food, especially artificial sweeteners. We did a study in mice, and we found that there is an increase in protobacteria when you have these artificial, which is known to be pro-inflammatory. Okay, so it's very important to avoid that, and of course saturated fat. Having also the healthy approach have been known through a number of clinical trials to reduce the depression. So here is the take-home message. Eating healthier diet and participate in regular exercise could be a really very, very important treatment that help people with low mood. Okay?
Yes.
Now, nutritional supplements is another subject.
Yes.
So here we, as you know, there are a number of studies have been shown to alleviate depression, for example, the probiotics. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very important now. People ask me, "Oh, will I take any probiotic?" It would be good if you really delve deep and see is there scientific support to the claims. This is very, very important, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because having a probiotic, we need evidence. I am a professor. I like to have academic as well as controlled clinical trials to show that using this particular probiotic or mix of probiotics is very, very important and helpful. Okay, there are many studies for that, and you can see there is a really multi strain
Yeah.
probiotics. You can see has a large number, and a lot of studies shows it's really better to use more than one strain because different strain can bring different things. In fact,
What
I've
about the
been doing
total
studies.
amount? People believe that the larger the amount, like the amount of like 50 billions and up, what do you think
Yes,
about the optimal number?
I really don't think it has to be 50 billion and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What I found, I looked at some studies. We looked,
Mm-hmm.
for example, in our studies, which I mentioned to you, 30 billion was really very good. But then we did another study at less, like 5 billion. It was able to do some of these activity. So it does not have to be 150 billion and whatever, like people say. I
Yeah.
will go for probiotics that have multiple strains. I would include not only bacteria, but I will include also Saccharomyces boulardii, which is yeast, because also it can help to keep candida down. And sometimes we published a paper with Dr. Luca Di Martino where we showed having probiotic plus the enzyme amylase is able to break down the what you call the biofilm that forms in our gut lining. It's like the biofilm formed in our plaque. We have to brush it every day, but we cannot do it with our stomach. Brush it every day. So having a probiotic plus amylase, we showed is able to break down this biofilm and reduce inflammation. Okay.
Yes.
Uh, then underlying mechanism, as I mentioned, it really will be able to reduce the pro-inflammatory cytokine and increase the good ones as well. Okay.
Okay.
Now, lifestyle modification. We talked about exercise. Sleep is another important factor. Really, 7 to 9 hours will be fantastic because this will help as well. Exercise and depression, there are a number of studies where shows exercise can reduce many inflammatory conditions that influence depression and also intestinal barrier dysfunction, which means it helps us to have less leaky gut. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you can see I am a scientist. I can keep on going and going and going, but really the story is it's very important to have exercise. It's a holistic approach. Get the
Yeah.
right diet, exercise, do some meditation. All of it will really help you and reduce depression and stress and other sorts of situations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Uh, and of course, it's bi-directional relationship, as I mentioned. It's you improve your gut, you improve your brain. You have less stress, you have better brain as well. And here is the exercise and how the mechanism. I go into a lot of details. I hope these slides will help your people, but I'm happy to help them if they have other questions down the line. So this is the holistic approach, eating a healthier diet, taking regular exercise, and that sound sleep. All of it will come to try to support our microbiome and, of course, improve the gut-brain axis. And this is what I talked to you about, the total gut balance. I'm not going to go into detail. I mean, you can see it. This is the nutritionally balanced, rich in fiber, low sugar. Sugar is very important to be low because Candida loves sugar. Okay?
Yes.
And the diet is flexible. You have low fat because it's good to have the dairy product, but it should not have the whole milk. Okay,
Oh, could you please
this
go
is
back to the nutrition? Because there's a couple of conflicting information right now in the industry, about being a high protein diet, the recommendation right now for muscle mass and for preventing fragility as we age. So I wanted to address the protein and your intake and your personal recommendations in general. Yeah, the second slide, adapting. Yeah, this one. You see how you recommend the lean animal proteins, primarily from seafood, a bit of poultry thrown in. So could you please cover more about all different types of proteins, specifically like the high protein animal and red meats?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have, as you say, protein from plants, for
Yeah.
example, because it is not as full of the rich fatty acids and this sort of thing. With respect to, I like to have seafood because in addition to the protein that gives you also the omega 3, it gives you poultry the same, does not have as much effect. So it's very important. You need rich plant proteins,
Yeah.
and in the book, it describes all different proteins which you can use. Uh, I love also for people to have beans, for example, because of fiber and some proteins in it. Beans, lentils, for example, is very, very important as well.
Got it. Okay. All right. And then let's get into some of the treatments. Yeah, for like a bacterial overgrowth or like here you have fungi overgrowth, if there's any specific recommendations that you give people to create a more balanced gut.
You know, the most important, as you say, I always look at it, it's like to have a good balance, it's all in our hands. You need, first of all, to select the right healthy food. Cut processed food, cut all the sugars, like minimal amount. Uh, uh, Try to get your, if you want some sugar, you can come honey, one spoon, for example. Not too much of it. Again, sugar is not very good for candida. If you take certain vitamins and fiber, like protobacteria, you remember I told you it's pro-inflammatory. Fiber is great. So anything that have fiber, like again, the beans, the lentils, all this is very, very important.
Yes.
The nuts are very important because they have good proteins and some fiber as well. Vitamins, we talked about it, is really critical. We have the vitamin B, series A, B, and C for candida, and vitamin D3 is very important as well for the protobacteria, to reduce the protobacteria.
Vitamin D3.
All
Okay.
of these will help.
Amazing. Mm-hmm.
And here is the list. Look at this. You overview of the total gut balance. You can see the coconut oil, the optional stuff, the quantity you need, all of this. Alcohol, for example, it has to be limited, no more than 3 glasses per week. I like to drink red wine, for example, but 1 glass. Don't drink the bottle. And at the bottom, look, no added sugar sweetener. I told you why. We did a study for that. No refined grains, no processed cured meat. All of these should be taken into consideration. But the top one, really, in a daily basis, are, you can see up, including eggs, low-fat or non-fat dairy products, tofu, tempeh, and edamame are very good. Apple cider vinegar is very good because also it can break down biofilm. Okay, so synthesized vegetables, very important. Antioxidants.
Very important.
We have antioxidants.
Dr. Mahmoud, could you address artificial sweeteners specifically, or things like, monk fruit or stevia that people are loading up on because they don't have calories and they think it's healthy?
Yes. Yeah, I am completely opposing using these sweeteners. Because I told you, we did a study and it increased protobacteria. And if you increase protobacteria, what happens, it started to have inflammation. It's a red flag for inflammation. And that's why I say if you take too much of that, you really need Like if you have protobacteria elevated level, then you have vitamin D3 and fiber you need to do. And we published that paper on artificial sweetener. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very important that we really don't have it. And you get used to it. Like I use, again, as a Lebanese, I grow in a young boy, we have tea in the morning and, with cheese and whatever. My brother used to load his tea with sugar. My dad used to tell him, you are eating sugar, not, not tea. Now I don't have it, and you get used to it and then you can enjoy the tea itself.
Yes,
So
I
that's where
agree.
I think, yeah.
The taste buds really
Well,
adjust and change. Mm-hmm.
yes, yes. I think, and here is a summary of the recommendation.
Uh-huh.
Lifestyle recommendation, chronic stress, inflammation, weakening gut lining. We have all the toxic, further decline in immune system. So that you need activity between 15 20 minutes a day. It has to be moderate. You don't have to kill yourself, okay? People sometimes they go from not moving at all to killing themselves. No, take it easy. Take it 15 20 minutes is plenty, and then you increase it to half an hour, okay? Limit stress, have prioritization, take time for yourself each day, meditation and yoga, and sleep 7 to 8 hours a day, or 7 to 9 hours. So, but these are the holistic approach you need to follow, and eat the right stuff.
I love it. Dr. Mahmoud, this was incredible. Very big overview of essential information. And I love how you break it down to a very holistic approach and very generic recommendations that most people just want to skip, and they just want to believe that there's a quick fix, that there's a specific supplement that's just going to change their life and they don't have to do any of this. And I truly love how you allocated so many slides to talk about stress. I've developed the gut-brain method after years of working with people and realizing that it's actually, when I say the gut-brain method, I say like there's gut with all this like science and information that we all should know. But for the brain, I've added a lot of mindfulness techniques, including different meditations, because I'm a yoga teacher in addition to being a clinical dietitian, to help people understand the value of mindfulness techniques, breath works, which everyone could do before they start their meal, right? And to stimulate the vagus nerve. So all of this is critically important. And I feel like this is what in the industry is not being covered right now. And some of the emotions that you've covered, that anger or stress could really be targeted towards the body, if we're not expressing it, and not these emotions that inside inner stress. So I really, really appreciate your lecture today. It's extremely insightful. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much for
It's really
today.
great. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it tremendously. And
Yeah.
I let me know if there is anything I can do, and appreciate it. Have a great week.
Yes, maybe next time I would love to have another lecture with you about the testing, the micro
Sure.
testing and testing of not just the bacteria, the yeast, the parasites, but also the fungi. That's your specialty
Sure.
that you teach, right? And that's what I
Yes.
feel like would be hugely beneficial for the next lecture.
I'll be delighted. I'll be delighted. Okay.
Great. Thank you.